In this video, we examine when zookeepers were mauled by their animals. From a routine feeding with a tiger that turned deadly to a single miscommunication that left a keeper alone with a grizzly. But first, we begin at a Midwestern zoo, where one keeper's trust in safety protocols would cost her everything. It was April 8th, 2015, when the morning shift began at a mid-sized zoo located on the outskirts of Indianapolis. Spring had arrived early that year, bringing clear skies and temperatures climbing into the low 60s. The Big Cat facility housed 3 Sumatran tigers, including a 7-year-old male named Rama, who had been at the zoo since he was 18 months old. Marlo Fenwick was a 28-year-old zookeeper who had worked in the carnivore department for 3 years. She had earned a degree in zoology from Purdue University and had specifically requested an assignment to the Big Cat section. Her performance reviews consistently noted her attention to detail and strict adherence to safety protocols. Marlo had participated in over 400 feeding sessions with the tigers without incident. The feeding protocol required keepers to secure the animals in holding areas behind reinforced shift gates before entering the main enclosure. The system used hydraulic mechanisms controlled from an external panel, with visual confirmation required before any keeper entered an animal space. Marlo had performed this exact routine hundreds of times. That morning's feeding schedule called for Rama to receive 25 pounds of horse meat and supplemental vitamins. Marlo activated the shift gate system at approximately 7:45 a.m., watching through the observation window as Rama moved from the main enclosure into the holding area. The hydraulic gate descended into position with its characteristic mechanical hum. The control panel displayed a green indicator light confirming the gate had sealed properly. Standard practice also required a physical sightline check of the gate's bottom edge and track alignment before entry, since indicator lights could remain green even when a gate was seated unevenly. On busy mornings, keepers sometimes relied on the panel and the observation window alone, especially when the animal appeared fully shifted and calm. The facility's ventilation fans and echoing mechanical noise also made subtle changes in gate position difficult to detect from the keeper walkway. Sumatran tigers are the smallest tiger subspecies, but remain apex predators capable of taking down prey weighing over 600 to 800 pounds. Adult males weigh between 220 and 310 pounds, with muscular builds optimized for explosive power. Their canine teeth measure up to 3 inches in length, designed to deliver killing bites that sever spinal cords or crush windpipes. Tigers possess retractable claws reaching 2.5 inches that function like curved knives, capable of inflicting wounds several inches deep with a single swipe. Their bite force exceeds 1,000 pounds per square inch. Marlo entered the main enclosure carrying the prepared food in 2 heavy buckets. She moved toward the feeding platform located approximately 30 feet from the shift gate. The morning sun filtered through the skylights, illuminating the enclosure's artificial rock formations and vegetation. Unbeknownst to staff, a worn solenoid valve in the hydraulic control system had begun allowing gradual pressure bleed, a condition known as hydraulic creep. Although the gate initially descended into position and the control panel registered it as sealed, the mechanical locking pin failed to fully engage due to slight misalignment in the track. Over the next several minutes, the slow loss of hydraulic pressure allowed the gate to rise incrementally along one side. The movement was subtle and produced little noise, masked by the facility's ventilation systems. The shift gate's weight should have been held by hydraulic pressure and a mechanical stop working together, but with the pin not fully seated, the system effectively relied on pressure alone. As the valve bled down, the gate didn't lift cleanly as a whole. One side rose first, turning the gate into a skewed barrier that still looked down from a distance. From Marlo's position near the feeding platform, the opening would have been outside her direct line of sight unless she turned fully back toward the track. A maintenance inspection conducted in January had documented minor hydraulic pressure variance during cold weather testing. The fluctuation remained within acceptable manufacturer tolerances and did not require immediate part replacement. Because the gate continued passing indicator light verification and visual descent checks, the worn solenoid valve was scheduled for review during the facility's next annual service interval rather than being replaced immediately. The gate crept upward along one edge, the unbalanced movement creating a gap of roughly 14 inches at its widest point. From across the enclosure, the gate still appeared fully lowered, the skewed rise subtle enough to blend into shadow and steel framing. Marlo had her back to the gate when Rama emerged. She was bending to place the first bucket on the feeding platform when the tiger crossed the 30-foot distance. His approach followed natural stalking behavior, using the enclosure's artificial vegetation for partial concealment until the final rush. The impact drove Marlowe forward into the feeding platform. Rama's front paws struck her upper back and shoulders, his claws extending automatically as they made contact. The force knocked the air from her lungs as she went down. The tiger's jaws closed around the back of her neck, his canines driving into muscle and bone with instinctive precision. The pressure applied to her neck caused immediate, severe trauma to the cervical spine. Rama shook his head once, a reflexive predatory motion rather than sustained aggression. The force of that single movement caused catastrophic damage incompatible with survival. Within seconds, staff members in the observation area triggered emergency protocols. A keeper activated the high-pressure water cannons from the external control panel, striking Rama with multiple streams. The sudden stimulus caused him to release Marlowe and retreat toward the partially raised shift gate. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 8 minutes. Marlowe received emergency stabilization on site before being airlifted to a regional trauma hospital. She died during emergency surgery from extensive neck injuries and severe blood loss. The subsequent investigation determined that a worn solenoid valve combined with a misaligned mechanical locking pin had allowed gradual hydraulic creep in the shift gate system. Although the gate initially registered as closed, the slow loss of pressure caused one side to rise incrementally, creating a gap sufficient for the tiger to escape. Maintenance records indicated the valve had not been replaced since the enclosure's construction 12 years earlier. In response, the zoo replaced all hydraulic control units in animal holding areas, installed redundant mechanical drop bars on every shift gate, and implemented a dual verification procedure requiring 2 keepers to confirm complete gate closure before any entry. While Indianapolis had witnessed a tragedy caused by equipment failure, a European facility would soon demonstrate that even the most experienced keepers remained vulnerable during routine interactions with great apes. It was November 19, 2014, when morning routines began at a zoological garden located near Dusseldorf. The autumn chill had settled over the region, with temperatures hovering just above freezing and heavy clouds promising rain before midday. Inside the great ape house, tropical conditions were maintained year-round, with climate control systems recreating the humid warmth of African rainforests. Hendrik Voss was a 43-year-old senior keeper who had worked with the facility's gorilla troop for 17 years. He had started as an apprentice keeper immediately after completing his education and had risen to become the department head. Over nearly 2 decades, Hendrik had developed particularly strong working relationships with the gorillas, especially the dominant silverback who had arrived as a juvenile during Hendrik's second year. The troop consisted of 6 western lowland gorillas, including the 380-pound silverback named Batu. The facility utilized modern enclosure design with multiple interconnected spaces, allowing keepers to shift animals between areas without direct contact. A vestibule system permitted enrichment delivery and limited maintenance, while animals remained in adjacent spaces, separated by reinforced barriers and transfer points. Protocol required the troop to be shifted into the outdoor enclosure, while Hendrik worked inside the vestibule, separated from the animals by steel mesh and steel frame transfer interfaces. Western lowland gorillas are among the largest primates, with adult males weighing between 300 and 430 pounds. Their arm span can exceed 8 feet, and their upper body strength is estimated at 4 to 10 times that of an adult human male. Despite their generally calm demeanor, gorillas possess canine teeth up to 2 inches long and hands capable of crushing bone. In captive environments, males may display aggressive or territorial behavior when stimulated or frustrated, particularly when structural features allow close proximity. Hendrik entered the vestibule at approximately 9:20 a.m., carrying bundles of fresh browse and several puzzle feeders loaded with fruit. The gorillas had been shifted outside, though Batu remained near a transfer window, observing Hendrik's movements. This behavior was routine and had occurred during hundreds of previous enrichment sessions. The timing mattered. Morning routines in the ape house often produced a brief spike in agitation when animals could see food items being handled, but could not access them. Batu remained close to the transfer window as Hendrik moved between feeders, tracking the motion and sound of fruit shifting inside the puzzle devices. In captive troops, dominant males sometimes redirect that stimulation into barrier testing behavior, especially when they have learned that pulling and shaking produces a visible reaction from keepers or changes the flow of routine. The vestibule barrier extended from floor to ceiling, consisting of rigid steel mesh panels mounted within a reinforced frame anchored into concrete. Near one upper corner, where a mesh panel met a steel support post and an access seam for maintenance, repeated stress over years of use had caused slight separation at the junction. The opening appeared within acceptable limits under inspection conditions but remained vulnerable under the kind of dynamic stress a large primate could generate. As Hendrik distributed browse material, Batu approached the barrier. The silverback grasped the mesh near the junction point and pulled, a behavior observed previously without consequence. This time, the force shifted the compromised seam. Records later showed that Batu had demonstrated similar barrier testing behavior on at least 4 prior occasions over the previous year, each time stopping short of structural compromise. The incidents were logged as routine dominance displays rather than infrastructure threats, and no reinforcement work had been ordered because the panel itself had not visibly deformed during inspections. The rigid panel itself did not deform, but the separation at the frame widened, creating an uneven triangular gap between the mesh and support post. Batu climbed partway up the barrier, using the framework for leverage, his weight prying the angled opening to several inches at its widest point. One of his hands forced through the gap, fingers finding purchase on the steel framework inside the vestibule. The escalation unfolded rapidly. Batu gripped the inner frame and pulled himself closer. Hendrik turned and moved toward the vestibule exit, located less than 8 feet away. Before he could reach it, Batu's arm caught him at the shoulder, fingers twisting into the fabric of his uniform with crushing force. The grip halted Hendrik instantly. Batu pulled him backward toward the barrier, the motion driven by territorial aggression rather than feeding behavior. The silverback bit down on Hendrik's upper arm, canines penetrating deep into muscle and fracturing bone. Additional bites followed in rapid succession to the shoulder and the side of his neck, the gorilla's immense jaw pressure crushing through tissue and severing blood vessels with each strike. Hendrik collapsed against the base of the barrier as Batu maintained his hold, continuing to pull him closer to the opening. Staff members activated emergency alarms and deployed fire extinguishers and noise devices from a safe distance. For over a minute, Batu maintained his grip before the intensifying disturbance caused him to release Hendrik and retreat toward the outdoor enclosure. Emergency medical teams entered the vestibule within minutes of the all-clear signal. Hendrik was unresponsive, having lost massive amounts of blood from compound wounds to his arm, shoulder, and neck. Paramedics initiated emergency treatment on site, but the severity of the blood loss and the depth of the neck injuries had caused irreversible damage. Hendrik was pronounced dead during transport to a regional trauma center. The investigation determined that the barrier junction had degraded over years of repeated manipulation by the gorillas, a pattern that routine visual inspections had failed to identify as a critical risk. The facility immediately reinforced all 8 barrier junctions with welded steel plates and eliminated any interfaces that could be leveraged from the animal side. While Germany's Great Ape facility had learned fatal lessons about barrier integrity, an Australian reptile park would soon face tragedy when assumptions about sedation protocols proved fatally wrong. It was January 23, 2014, when summer heat settled over a reptile park located north of Brisbane. Temperatures climbed into the mid-90s by mid-morning, with humidity levels making the heat feel oppressive. The facility specialized in Australia's native reptiles, but also maintained several exotic species, including a 17-foot male Nile crocodile that had been a resident for over a decade. Callum Driscoll was a 34-year-old maintenance contractor hired to repair the filtration system in the crocodile's pool. His company handled plumbing and mechanical systems for several facilities across Queensland, but Callum's experience with zoo maintenance was limited. He had worked at the reptile park twice before on minor repairs, though never in areas housing large, dangerous animals. The crocodile pool required draining for the filtration work. Park management had arranged for their veterinary team to chemically restrain the crocodile beforehand, using a partial immobilization protocol intended to reduce movement rather than induce full anesthesia. The procedure had been used successfully on previous occasions, but always with veterinary staff present to monitor the animal's condition throughout the work. The schedule called for the veterinary team to administer the drugs early in the morning, drain the pool, complete the repairs, and refill the system before the restraint wore off. However, an emergency at another facility forced the veterinary staff to leave the park shortly after dosing. They informed management that the crocodile was sedated, but emphasized that continued monitoring was recommended, and that responsiveness could return unpredictably in warm conditions. Nile crocodiles rank among the largest and most dangerous reptilian predators, with adult males commonly exceeding 16 feet in length and weighing over 1,600 pounds. Their slow metabolism allows them to remain motionless for extended periods, conserving energy until sudden bursts of action are required. Crocodiles possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, generating pressures exceeding 5,000 pounds per square inch. In reptiles, chemical restraint can be unreliable, particularly in high temperatures, where drug absorption and clearance may accelerate unevenly. Callum arrived at approximately 11 a.m., several hours after the drugs had been administered. Park staff confirmed the crocodile had been restrained and showed Callum the drained pool, where the animal lay motionless in approximately 8 inches of remaining water. The crocodile's body was still, its eyes closed, showing no visible response to nearby activity. Reptile sedation protocols require continuous tactile and reflex testing at regular intervals, particularly in high ambient temperatures where metabolic rates can fluctuate unpredictably. That morning, no such interval testing was performed once the veterinary team departed, leaving staff to rely solely on visual stillness as confirmation of restraint. Callum descended the maintenance ladder into the pool, carrying his tools and replacement components for the filtration system. The filtration intake was located on the opposite side of the enclosure, roughly 25 feet from the crocodile's position. Park policy required a staff member to remain present during any work involving restrained animals, but the supervising keeper had been called away to address a visitor issue and instructed Callum to continue. For roughly 30 minutes, Callum worked without incident, replacing a damaged valve assembly and checking pressure seals. Heat radiated from the concrete walls and floor of the partially drained pool. As the morning progressed, the crocodile's physiological response to the restraint changed as its body temperature increased. The crocodile's eyes opened. There was no thrashing or vocalization, only a subtle shift in alertness. Callum remained unaware, focused on the filtration housing. Based on the later investigation, the animal had regained partial motor control and responsiveness, while still appearing externally subdued. The attack came without warning. The crocodile launched forward with a powerful lunge driven by its hindquarters. Its massive body propelled across the wet concrete by rapid, full-bodied thrusts that used the shallow remaining water as lubrication against the smooth pool floor. Callum turned at the sound of displaced water, but the distance closed almost instantly. The crocodile's jaws clamped onto his left leg just below the knee, the crushing force shattering bone on impact. Callum's screams drew staff from the adjacent building. The crocodile held its grip and remained largely stationary, jaws locked around the limb. Emergency protocols were initiated immediately, but staff lacked specialized equipment to safely disengage a crocodile from a live victim. The supervisor returned within minutes and made the decision to use a fire axe to strike the crocodile's snout, a last resort method sometimes effective against partially restrained reptiles. After several blows, the crocodile loosened its grip. Staff pulled Callum free as the animal withdrew toward the corner of the pool, its movements uncoordinated and sluggish under the lingering effects of the drugs. Emergency medical teams arrived within 15 minutes. Callum's leg had sustained catastrophic injuries, with multiple fractures and severe damage to major blood vessels. Surgeons attempted limb-saving procedures, but complications, including infection and tissue death, made amputation below the knee unavoidable 3 days later. The investigation determined that the drug dosage itself had been appropriate, but elevated body temperature had altered the crocodile's response, shortening the effective restraint window. The facility revised its procedures, mandating continuous veterinary presence and physical barriers during any maintenance involving chemically restrained animals. While Australia's reptile park had learned hard lessons about the unpredictability of chemical restraint, a Southeast Asian elephant facility would soon face the ancient danger that every mahout knows, but some still underestimate. It was March 11, 2017, when the morning arrived humid and warm at an elephant conservation facility located in northern Thailand. The dry season had left the landscape brown and dusty, with temperatures already climbing toward the 90s before mid-morning. The facility housed 12 Asian elephants, including 3 adult bulls used for breeding and tourist interaction programs. Somchai Ratana was a 56-year-old elephant handler who had worked with elephants for 38 years. He had learned the trade from his father and grandfather, both mahouts who had worked in the logging industry before tourism replaced timber as the primary economic use for captive elephants. Somchai's experience included handling bulls during must, the annual period of heightened aggression driven by elevated testosterone levels. The facility's breeding bull, a 42-year-old male named Plai Thong, had entered must approximately 2 weeks earlier. The visible signs were obvious. Temporal glands on either side of his head secreted dark, oily fluid, and his behavior had become increasingly aggressive toward other elephants and handlers. Facility policy typically restricted direct contact with bulls in must, but Plai Thong required a medical examination to assess a minor foot injury that had developed before the must period began. Somchai had decided to proceed with a basic examination, despite Plai Thong's condition, believing his long relationship with the elephant would allow safe inspection of the foot. Several younger handlers had expressed concern, but Somchai's experience and authority within the facility gave him final decision-making power over elephant management. Asian elephants are the largest land animals in Asia, with adult males weighing between 8,000 and 11,000 pounds and standing 9 to 10 feet tall at the shoulder. Bulls enter musth annually, a period lasting several weeks to months during which testosterone levels increase up to 60 times normal levels. During musth, even normally calm bulls become unpredictable and extremely dangerous, with heightened aggression toward humans and other elephants. Their tusks, present in most males, can grow to 5 feet in length and serve as weapons during aggressive encounters. Elephants can move deceptively fast despite their size, reaching speeds of 15 miles per hour in short charges. Somchai approached Plai Thong at approximately 8:30 a.m. while the elephant was secured by a chain attached to his front right leg. This tethering method had been used for decades in traditional elephant management, though modern experts increasingly criticized it as inadequate for controlling bulls in musth. Somchai carried his mahout hook, a traditional tool used for giving commands through pressure points. Plai Thong stood quietly as Somchai approached, showing no immediate signs of aggression. The elephant's temporal glands continued secreting musth fluid, but his body language appeared calm. Somchai spoke to the elephant in the traditional manner, using familiar vocal commands while moving toward the injured foot. Somchai had been examining the foot for less than a minute when Plai Thong's demeanor changed. The elephant's ears spread wide, and he shifted his weight. These subtle warnings preceded the attack by perhaps 2 seconds. Plai Thong's trunk swept sideways with tremendous force, striking Somchai in the chest and shoulder. The impact lifted the handler off his feet and threw him backward approximately 10 feet. Somchai hit the ground hard, the impact forcing air from his lungs. The elephant lunged forward against the restraining chain, which gave way at a rust-weakened link that had been exposed to years of monsoon humidity and intermittent contact with elephant urine. Freed from the tether, Plai Thong moved toward the fallen handler. His front foot came down on Somchai's lower body, the elephant's weight crushing bone and internal organs. The elephant stepped forward again, his foot striking Somchai's chest with similar devastating force. Younger handlers had been positioned nearby per facility safety protocols for working with musth bulls. They began shouting and striking metal objects together, creating noise designed to distract the elephant. One handler grabbed a bamboo pole and struck Plai Thong's hindquarters, a technique normally effective for redirecting elephant attention. But the musth condition made Plai Thong far less responsive to traditional control methods. The elephant remained focused on Somchai for several more seconds before finally responding to the distraction. He turned away from the handler and moved toward the far side of the enclosure. Staff members reached Somchai within moments but found him unconscious and severely injured. Emergency services were contacted immediately, but the facility's remote location meant the nearest hospital was over an hour away by road. Somchai died from massive internal injuries approximately 40 minutes after the attack, before medical personnel could arrive. Investigation confirmed that Plai Thong's musty condition had been properly documented, but that facility protocols had been violated by attempting direct contact with the bull during this dangerous period. The facility implemented stricter policies prohibiting any close contact with bulls in musth, regardless of handler experience level. While Thailand's elephant facility had paid a tragic price for underestimating musth aggression, a Canadian wildlife center would soon discover that communication failures during routine procedures could prove equally deadly. It was September 6, 2013, when early autumn arrived at a wildlife rehabilitation center located in the interior of British Columbia. The morning temperature hovered around 50 degrees, with scattered clouds and calm winds creating ideal conditions for outdoor maintenance work. The facility specialized in rehabilitating injured wildlife, including several non-releasable bears maintained in permanent enclosures for educational purposes. Tavish Drummond was a 31-year-old wildlife keeper who had worked at the center for 5 years. He held a degree in wildlife biology from the University of Northern British Columbia and had previously worked at a national park conducting bear research. Tavish's responsibilities included daily care for the facility's 3 resident grizzly bears, including a 9-year-old female named Coda, who had been orphaned as a cub after her mother was killed by a vehicle. The cleaning protocol for bear enclosures required shifting animals into secure holding areas before any keeper entered the main enclosure. The system used manually operated gates controlled by levers located outside the enclosures, with visual confirmation required before entry. The facility employed 4 keepers who rotated responsibilities, making clear communication about which animals had been secured essential. That morning, Tavish was scheduled to clean Coda's enclosure, while his colleague prepared food in the facility's kitchen building, located approximately 100 yards away. The protocol called for the second keeper to shift Coda into the holding area before Tavish entered the main enclosure. The facility used a simple system to signal shifts, a laminated tag that was supposed to be clipped to the access door once the bear was confirmed locked in the holding area. The tag was stored on a hook beside the lever controls, and it prevented exactly this kind of assumption-based entry. That morning, the tag remained on the hook. Tavish did not check it, and the second keeper did not place it, each relying on the routine to carry the responsibility. By the time Tavish reached the enclosure, the only confirmation he had was a closed door and an empty sight line. Grizzly bears are among North America's largest and most powerful predators, with adult females weighing between 290 and 400 pounds and males reaching 400 to 790 pounds. Despite their bulk, grizzlies can sprint at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour over short distances. Their front claws measure 3 to 4 inches in length, designed for digging but equally effective as weapons capable of inflicting devastating wounds. Grizzly bears possess bite forces exceeding 1,100 pounds per square inch, with jaw strength sufficient to crush bowling balls. Bears in captivity often develop food-motivated behaviors, associating human presence with feeding time and becoming agitated when expected food does not materialize. Their intelligence allows them to remember and exploit routine patterns in facility operations. Tavish arrived at the enclosure at approximately 9:15 a.m., carrying cleaning supplies and fresh substrate material. He looked through the observation window into the main enclosure, but the low morning sun cast deep shadows across the far corner, where artificial rock formations created additional blind spots. Seeing no bear visible from his angle, he assumed Coda had been shifted into the holding area as scheduled. The holding area door appeared closed. What Tavish could not see was that Coda remained in the main enclosure, concealed behind the rock formations in the shadowed far corner. The second keeper had become distracted by a phone call regarding a new animal intake and had not completed the shifting procedure. He had assumed Tavish would verify the bear's location before entering, while Tavish had assumed the protocol had already been followed. Tavish unlocked the enclosure's entry door and stepped inside, closing it behind him according to safety protocols designed to prevent animal escapes. He moved toward the center of the enclosure, still unaware of Coda's presence. The bear remained hidden for approximately 30 seconds, a brief interval, before reacting to the unexpected human presence. Coda emerged from behind the rock formations with startling speed. Her movement was driven by territorial defense and possible food anticipation rather than predatory intent. In rehabilitation settings, bears often associate keepers with feeding routines and respond aggressively when surprised outside expected patterns. The attack was swift and overwhelming. Coda covered the distance in seconds, her bulk moving with the characteristic rolling gait grizzlies use at high speed. Tavish turned at the sound of her approach, but had no time to reach the entry door. The bear struck Tavish with her front paw, the force and extended claws tearing deep wounds across his back and shoulders and knocking him violently to the ground. As he fell, Coda bit into his upper back and shoulder area, her jaws clamping down with crushing force. The combined impact of the strike, bite, and the bear's weight caused severe trauma to his upper torso and spine, resulting in vertebral fractures and spinal injury. The second keeper stepped outside the kitchen building moments later and noticed sudden movement through the enclosure observation window. Recognizing the situation, he ran to the enclosure and activated the emergency alarm system. Loud sirens and flashing lights, designed to startle animals and interrupt attacks, filled the area. Coda released Tavish and moved away toward the holding area, reacting to the sudden sensory disturbance. Staff members waited several minutes to ensure the bear had fully retreated before entering the enclosure. Emergency medical personnel arrived by helicopter within 25 minutes due to the facility's remote location. Tavish was airlifted to a trauma center in critical condition, but died 3 days later from complications including infection and organ failure. The investigation identified the communication breakdown between keepers as the primary cause, leading the facility to implement radio-based confirmation systems and electronic monitoring displays showing real-time animal locations at all access points. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.